There's a subtle shift that doesn't announce itself. No dramatic farewell, no grand finale, just a soft unwinding. The text thread you no longer check, the old ache that no longer stings, the need to explain, justify, or win them back, gone. At first you don't even realize it. You just wake up one morning and something feels different, lighter. As if a door you kept pushing against has finally opened, not with force, but by no longer needing to. You haven't forced closure. You've outgrown the loop. Psychologically, this is a moment of quiet alchemy. A chapter has ended, not because you burned it, but because you no longer live inside its lines. And what remains is space. Sacred, quiet, fertile space. This is not the emptiness of loss, but the breath before the next inhale. In Jungian terms, you are no longer being unconsciously pulled backward. You've emerged from the spiral, not by force, but by integration. And now, something else is calling. If you feel like the past no longer grips you, if your heart feels oddly clean, you might not be lost. You might be closing a cycle. Carl Jung taught that the psyche does not evolve in a straight line, but in spirals. Like nature, we circle back again and again, revisiting old wounds, patterns, and people. Not to suffer them, but to see them differently. He called this individuation, the slow, symbolic journey toward wholeness. But wholeness isn't about endless becoming. Sometimes it's about completing. In Jung's framework, closure isn't forgetting, it's integration. When something painful repeats, a toxic relationship, a self-sabotaging habit, an inner narrative that keeps shrinking your light, it's often the unconscious trying to resolve what hasn't yet been seen. The psyche repeats until the lesson is metabolized. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung warned, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Many of the cycles we live through, karmic, ancestral, emotional, aren't random. They are unfinished business, not just from this lifetime perhaps, but from our soul's deeper memory. But when we stop reacting to the same triggers, when we no longer long for what once wounded us, when we feel peace where there used to be pull, something profound has happened. We are no longer inside the story. We've become the witness. This is the beginning of liberation, not by running, but by staying, seeing, and eventually outgrowing. So how do you know you've reached this rare threshold? Let's gently walk through the 4 signs that you've come to close a soul-level cycle, seen through the lens of Jungian psychology. Sign number 1, the emotional charge is gone. That thing that used to sting, it no longer hurts. The story that once brought you to your knees now feels distant, like watching a scene from someone else's movie. The ache has dissolved, not because you pushed it away, but because you finally let it speak and then listened. When we are still inside a cycle, the emotion has heat. It pulls us in with obsession, regret, or a longing that gnaws at the heart. But when the cycle is closing, that heat cools. You don't even notice it at first. You just stop checking, stop replaying, stop needing closure from outside. There's no dramatic goodbye, just silence. And in that silence you realize the lesson has been digested. Jung wrote that psychic material, once made conscious, loses its grip. It no longer hijacks your energy or scripts your reactions. You haven't denied it, buried it, or rushed past it. You've absorbed it. And in doing so, something inside you has outgrown the pain. The wound that once screamed now speaks only in whispers, if at all. You no longer ask, "Why me?" with anguish, but perhaps softly murmur, "Thank you," with clarity. Not because the pain was justified, but because it shaped you into someone who now sees. This is not emotional bypassing. This is transformation. Shadow tension still lingers. You may remember, revisit, or even feel a trace of it again, but it doesn't grip you. The memory becomes a painting, no longer a mirror. You've stepped out of the frame, and in doing so, you shift from character to author. The old emotion no longer commands your breath or steals your sleep. You aren't numb, you're free. And that freedom feels strangely quiet, like a room that used to echo with noise and now holds only peace. If you find yourself remembering but not aching, observing but not spiraling, you may have reached a sacred edge. You're not in resistance, you're in release. And that's the first sign. The charge is gone, and with it, the need to keep returning. When you no longer tremble at the memory, you're standing at the door of release. And just beyond it, a new life quietly waits. Sign number 2, you lose the desire to prove or fix. After the sting has faded, after the tears have dried and the emotional charge has dissolved, something deeper settles in, an unfamiliar but sacred quiet. At first it might feel like absence, like something is missing, but as you sit with it, you realize it's not a void. It's space. It's peace. You're no longer fueled by the urge to circle back, to fix what went wrong, to be understood, or to seek closure from someone who could never give it. The battles you once waged in your mind, replaying conversations, imagining what you could have said differently, begin to fall silent. You stop needing to be seen as right, to be validated in your pain, or to prove your worth to anyone. Carl Jung observed that so much of our inner conflict arises from ego attachment, our insistence that the world should have bent to our expectations, that others should have treated us as we hoped, that justice should have arrived wrapped in apology. But when a soul cycle nears its completion, the ego softens. You begin to surrender, not in defeat but in awakening. You recognize that needing to be the wounded one, the avenger, or even the hero in the story is just another layer of the script that kept you bound. And so you release it. Not because you're over it in some shallow sense, but because you've grown beyond it. You no longer need to carry the weight of what could have been. You start living without reference to the past. The person who once lived in your head rent-free no longer occupies your emotional bandwidth. And you're okay with the fact that some things will never be resolved, because the truth is, they no longer define you. You've reclaimed your energy from the need to explain, fix, or prove. You've stepped into a new self that doesn't seek to convince the old world of its transformation. Yes, there may be moments of stillness that feel strange, where the absence of drama feels almost like a loss. But that silence, that's liberation. When you no longer need to be heard to feel whole, when the need for closure dissolves into self-containment, that's when the cycle has truly closed. Sign number 3, your inner compass has shifted. You no longer wake up consumed by thoughts of what was. The loop playing in your head has quieted, and in its place is a strange spaciousness, one that feels both disorienting and exhilarating. The things that once tugged at your heart, the person you couldn't stop checking up on, the version of yourself you were trying so hard to become, even the goals you clung to like lifeboats, now feel distant, not in a cold or bitter way, but in a quiet, resolved way. Just done. Something in you has turned. Carl Jung believed that our psychic energy, what he called libido, moves not just toward people or passions, but toward meaning. And when something has run its course, the psyche begins to withdraw its energy from that object, relationship, or fixation, and reallocate it elsewhere, often before we consciously realize it. You might catch yourself thinking about places you've never been, fascinated by topics you never used to care about, or drawn toward new people whose presence feels oddly fated. It's not distraction, it's realignment. Yourself, the capital S self, the true organizing center of your soul, is calling you forward. And what's powerful is that you're no longer moving from lack. You're not running to fill a hole or searching for what someone else didn't give you. You're moving from fullness, from integration, from a place of deep readiness. Yes, there may still be moments of nostalgia. The ache of leaving something behind, even if it no longer fits, can still linger like the echo of a familiar song. But the grief is softer now. It's not a pull backward, it's a bow to what was. You're not betraying the past. You're honoring it by letting it rest. When your curiosity starts to outgrow your comfort, when your soul whispers louder than your fears, that's how you know the cycle has turned. You begin to orient toward the unknown, not with dread, but with wonder. This is your compass realigning, not to escape what hurt you, but to grow into what calls you. When your energy naturally flows toward possibility instead of repair, you're not healing anymore. You're evolving. Sign number 4. You're no longer afraid of the ending. And then something quiet but powerful happens. You stop dreading the ending. The fear that once kept you circling the same story, clinging to the same people, delaying the inevitable, it begins to dissolve. Not because it suddenly becomes easy, but because it finally becomes true. Endings no longer feel like punishment. They feel like punctuation, necessary pauses in the sentence of your life. Carl Jung believed that the psyche evolves not in a straight line, but in cycles: death and rebirth, integration and letting go. He wrote that what we resist persists, and you begin to see the wisdom in that. You've stopped resisting. You no longer fight the closing door. You don't chase, plead, or bargain with fate. There's a sacred dignity in how you part ways now, whether with people, roles, beliefs, or old dreams. You let them go the way leaves fall in autumn, slowly, gently, and without protest. There may still be grief, yes, but it no longer owns you. It moves through you like weather, felt, witnessed, and released. In that release, you sense the deeper alchemy unfolding. The death of a chapter makes room for the soul to breathe, to dream again. You start to trust life's intelligence, the strange timing, the unanswered questions, the sudden turns. You stop needing guarantees. You stop needing control. Instead, you make space. Jung said that the self, our innermost core, knows where we're going even when the ego doesn't. And so, you start listening, not to the voice of fear, but to the whisper of readiness. And readiness doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It simply rises, slowly, quietly, like the dawn. You no longer fear what ends because you know what it makes possible. You realize now that the ending is not where it stops. It's where it turns. This is the deeper closure. Not revenge, not re-entry, not being proven right. Just this, a peaceful knowing that you're no longer trying to hold what life has asked you to set down. Shadow tension still lingers, especially in moments of silence or when the past tries to tempt you back. But now you meet it with awareness, not attachment. You don't collapse, you breathe, you rise. And in that rise you carry something rare, the courage to welcome the unknown. When you no longer fear what ends, you become a vessel for what wants to begin. You've come to meet endings not with resistance but with reverence. That shift alone opens space for something rare, not just a new chapter, but a deeper self. And so, what follows is not a conclusion, but a soft unfolding into something more whole, more still. You won't always recognize when a cycle closes. It doesn't arrive like thunder. It doesn't shout. It slips in like twilight, quiet, diffused, inevitable. One day you look back at what once consumed you, and it simply doesn't anymore. No hatred, no longing, just silence, a soft exhale. The moment you stop needing answers is often the moment you've found peace. You've let the old version of you go, not with violence, but with grace. Jung once wrote that individuation isn't about becoming someone new, but uncovering what's always been. So maybe closure is not the ending. Maybe it's the unveiling, the remembering of who you were before the fear, before the clinging, before you thought you needed anything outside of yourself to be whole. So if you feel a strange stillness, a quiet readiness that doesn't demand noise or proof, trust it. You're not disconnecting. You're dissolving the last threads that tethered you to who you used to be. You're not closing the door to your past. You're turning toward the horizon that's been calling you all along. And that is the real return. This is Echoes of Psyche, where we trace the hidden path of becoming through symbols, soul, and memory. If you felt a pulse in your chest while listening, it wasn't by chance. It was your own self, speaking through the silence.